To start with, let's first try and understand what is the origin of this art form. Sociologically, probably when even much before the advent of verbal communication, actions were used to communicate. When men were hunters and gatherers, they came back home and used actions to describe the day's events. And all these actions, these facial expressions, over a period of time got codified into a classical art form. And when you look at a mythological, I would rather call it as more of a philosophical origin of the art form. Let's forget the Brahmas and the Indras and the Shivas and go into the essence of why this art form was created. It is believed that Indra went to Lord Brahma and asked for an art form or a form of communication that would contain the essence of all the Vedas. And so Brahma is believed to have created this art form which encompasses all the essences of the Vedas. So, forgetting the aspect that it talks about a godhead or a particular religious connotation. But what ultimately was asked for and what was received was a form of communication which would help a layman understand certain ethical values, moral values, which would help him lead a very comfortable life and lead a meaningful life. So the very purpose of these art forms we see was for a purpose of communication. So what does this communication do? Whenever there's a process of communication, you have somebody who is talking, and we have an audience, and there is a subject that is being communicated. So through dance, what is it that we communicate? Practically anything under the sun, including the sun. So when it comes to a practice of this art form, we can look at it as practice perspective and a performance perspective. So when you practice, what are the benefits of being an artist? What are the benefits of being very particularly a dancer? Education can be for a mere living, or education can be for life. So most of the lessons that we learn in our schools and colleges are what help us with a living. It helps us acquire wealth and comfort, have a comfortable existence in this world. But what is education for life? Education for life is that which refines us as human beings and leads us, helps us to live a meaningful life, a purposeful life, and a satisfying life. It teaches us self-confidence, self-discipline, team spirit, time management, and there are so many other things that go into refining a human being. And this education for life is what fine arts teach us. So having said that, what all does this art form do to you? What does practicing this art form do to you? There's over years of training. The first thing that we learn as artists is to first discipline ourselves. And then comes the process of communication, putting into application what we learn. And in this process of communication is where, in the first place, gets very deeply in alignment with one's own self. Because you cannot dance or you cannot project or portray something that you do not have a conviction about or you don't have a belief about. So in these days where communication is becoming a real challenge, this art form is something that can act as a very effective tool in helping with communication. Because each and every character that we portray or any plot that we may portray, all these have to have a very deep thought and an internalization before they can be actually presented to an audience. So when we do different plots or take different characters, there's a very in-depth thinking about why these characters behave the way they do, how many different ways can we interpret the ways the characters behave, and this gives us a deep understanding about the myriad emotions that a human mind is capable of. Now it's become a fancy to say, oh, I am not emotional. I'm a very, I'm a very stoic person. But no, most of the interpersonal relationship issues that happen these days is because of this lack of understanding or acknowledging the emotions that a human mind is capable of. It is perfectly normal to be capable of these emotions and to be able to express them. So it is this deep understanding of what emotions are, perfectly comfortable in experiencing those emotions, in acknowledging the emotions, and to be able to express it to the other. So in this process of expression, the expression can happen in a very crass level, or it can be done with refinement and from a space of beauty and dignity. So it is the space of beauty and a refinement of communication that dance helps with. For instance, there's one particular composition. I'm just going to take one or two as examples to drive home this point. There is a composition where, again, I'm going back to the heroine smiling for the hero's love. There is this heroine whose husband or her lover has been disloyal to her, and he comes back home. And when he comes, she tells him, she rebukes him and tells him, her house is not on the street. Why are you here? This can be done in a very crass way, and that there can be a fight about it and lead to just reaction to a situation. For instance, Indentu vachittivira aladani illu ividi kadu opora. This kind of a reaction to a situation versus a response to a situation. This can be just considered as an artistic interpretation of the situation. But what it does in due course of time is when you train yourself to express or communicate your innermost feelings in a very refined manner, it translates into your psyche subconsciously and helps you respond to every situation and every issue more with an idea of seeking a solution rather than just reacting. So, instead of being so harsh and forceful, Indentu vachittivira aladani illu ividi kadu opora. Indentu vachittivira aladani illu ividi kadu opora. So when we think, and also when you dance, when you choreograph, there's a lot that goes, a lot of thought processes that go behind the process of choreography. So each situation, each plot, or each story, every character that you take, and when you take the lines of a poetry, you read the line, you read above the line, below the line, around the line, and you also not read the line. So this helps put ourselves in the shoes of each of those characters and try to understand where these actions, where these reactions, where these responses stem from. And this leads to an increase in the understanding of the psyche of other people. This creates in each one of us as an artist to be more empathetic, to be more sensitive to the way people behave with us in our day-to-day life, and also help us refine ourselves and express ourselves from a space of beauty, of refinement, and dignity. Like when I started, I said, we can address this anything under the sun, including the sun, when we dance. So this is another instance of how simple compositions can actually trigger your thoughts to a more socially relevant subject too. For instance, this again is a story from mythology, but which again is very pertinent even in the day-to-day life. This is a story of, this is more like a soliloquy, an imagination. What if Draupadi speaks to her own people? She addresses his father, her mother-in-law, her husband, and finally Lord Krishna, and saying, it's you people that I trusted. But right from birth, Father, you have always looked at me only as an object. I was given birth to just to fulfill your political vendetta. Have you even once thought about what my desires are, what my feelings are? So you paved the way for me to be treated as an object, which continued throughout my life. So this talks about the evils of patriarchy and how the situation of women till date, right from ancient times till now, how patriarchy has been detrimental in improving the life of a woman. So this is how this song goes. This is where Draupadi questions her own father. Nin nin sabadam vendrida vendi ennai velvil petrai veran ennin manathai adil edu karuthai யாதென நீயும் கேட்டது உண்டோ என்னின் மனத்தை அதில் எழு கருத்தை யாதென நீயும் கேட்டது உண்டோ. So why are we talking about all this? What relevance does this have to reimagining the future? So coming back to education for a living versus education for life. When this art form has such a potency to develop an individual overall, at this point of time, I would like to just make a request, or more like implore, not just the audience here, but all those who would be able to watch this at a much later point of time, the lawmakers, the educationists, the corporates, people who have the capacity to reimagine the future, to make a better future, to make art education, and education through art, an integral form, an integral part of the education system. Because what we are looking at is to develop humans with a very high emotional quotient, which is as important or probably even more important than having students with a high intelligence quotient. So this is how we could reimagine the future with the arts, for the arts, and for the artists. Thank you.